All right, guys, welcome to another video. Today, we're going to talk about the one concept that everyone with a well-developed account understands, at least to like a competent degree, right? And the concept is actually called opportunity cost. They might not even know the name, but they're doing it. And this isn't just whoever has more money who just throws at it. It could be a free-to-play. It could be a huge Kraken. Relative to the amount of resources they have, if they understand the idea of opportunity cost, what it does make sense, and the way they actually build their account will be really, really well developed for their spend level, right? Let's actually get over what I'm going to cover today. So before I continue, if you see the picture there, the Oklahoma City Thunder is an NBA team. They have probably one of the most talented young rosters in the NBA right now, where they could potentially win a championship. And at the same time, they have 13 first-round draft picks over the next 5 years, right? So normally an NBA team gets one first-round pick and one second-round pick every year. Not only were they able to construct a very good roster that's also built for the future in a small market city, right? Like Oklahoma City is not a big market city, so they don't necessarily have like an advantage where they could attract big free agents. Sam Presti, in my opinion, is probably the best GM in the NBA. And he's someone who clearly gets opportunity cost, right? So I still haven't defined it. Don't worry, we'll go over that next. But I'm going to start giving examples of commanders, equipment, armaments, even during war planning, and then kingdom building, recruiting, how this idea actually impacts every single aspect of this game, okay? Once you actually get this idea and you look back at my channel, about 90% of what I cover in my channel comes down to opportunity costs. When I'm mentoring or coaching people, it's talking about opportunity costs. The people that get it versus the people that don't, it's very, very clear. So hopefully after watching this video, you can start piecing some of this together, because things are dynamic, right? Like the commander cycle, everything comes out, it's going to change. You don't want to just rely on someone to tell you what to do. And especially because there's so many people with different opinions, right? Some opinions are, for lack of better than others. You want to be able to actually make that decision-making process for yourself. All right, so let's just go over the definition first. Opportunity cost is actually, I think, an economic term. That's where it originated from. So we're just going to read it, right? It's the benefit you missed out on when you make one choice over another. Think of opportunity cost as a trade-off. When you weigh a decision, you give up one or more benefits and make a choice. Every choice has an opportunity cost, right? So we'll bring it back to the game, right? If you were upgrading from the purple infantry pants, the Karak's humility, to the eternal night, right? That material is going to go into that and not somewhere else for the time being, right? So if you're going to make that upgrade, and actually it's a different video, but until you get to Awaken 2 for the Eternal Night, it's actually not an upgrade over a crit Karak's humility, right? But let's just pretend it is, right? Is that actually the best place to use your materials to get the biggest upgrade for the performance of your account? And it's actually not for almost all cases, right? Like, because that's one of the last things you actually want to upgrade. You're upgrading from purple to legendary, and when you upgrade, even though you could get an upgrade there, you're actually missing out where there's an opportunity cost somewhere else. So that's where you quote unquote made a wrong decision, right? So for example, for commanders, right, it's important to understand tier lists, right? When it comes to an investment tier list, it's not just factoring in how good the commander is. Obviously, the better a commander is, the amount of value you're getting out of that investment is going to be higher, right? But also when you're looking at a commander investment list, if the list is good, it should factor in what's the current landscape, what's probably going to come out for that troop type or other troop types. Right now, if you have a commander, does he actually kind of fit into the top 2 or even the top march, right? If he doesn't, then there's a chance that if you're only running, say, for example, one infantry march, once another infantry comes out, he's going to get bumped out, right? So a commander like Ragnar, for almost all players, is at best an average investment, right? Because he is a good commander. He's not great, but because of where we are currently with infantry, right, it's actually very possible that with the next infantry cycle, you can actually replace Ragnar with a better commander, right? So you can run Luce Alex, and you can even run the new better commander with Scipio, then Ragnar will be gone, right? So a lot of times you have to factor in, right? Here's some different opportunity cost questions for you to look at. How much of an upgrade is this, right? If it's going to cost me, say, 700 gold heads, 690, however you want to calculate it, and you're getting a 10% upgrade, is it worth it, right? If you get the 10% upgrade, you lose the 700 gold heads, right? That's opportunity cost, right? And then another one is, okay, if you invest in this commander, right, the next time you're going to need to invest in another commander could be, say, 2 months from now, right? So does this commander actually have longevity, right? So when you invest in them, would he still be relevant 6 months from now, a year from now, right? And then something people probably don't think about is mats, blueprints, armaments, and gold heads are actually almost drawing from the same pile, right? Obviously, you could acquire most of them through gems, but if you, especially as a younger player going into the mid game, right, KVK 3, 4, and 5, 6 ish, right, you're very gold head starved. As you're trying to funnel most of your resources into gold heads to catch up, you're going to be suffering on developing your equipment and blueprints, which is part of the reason why, in general, I think players going towards kind of nearing the end of the mid game, so usually like KVK 5, 6, maybe 7, there's a huge opportunity there because usually that's around the time when they're, for the most part, caught up with commanders, right? And then all of a sudden they don't have to divert all their resources or most of their resources to gold heads. And then all of a sudden their equipment or the armament can make a much bigger jump than the pace that we're going at before, right? So I'll just give you, I'll actually end up giving a real world example on every one of these just to, just so, you know, get you guys thinking a little bit, right? So if you look at the two scenarios I have at the bottom, right? This is NBA or basketball stats, right? If a player one is averaging 20 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists per game, even if you don't know what those stats mean, just think 20, 10, and 5, right? And then player two is averaging 22, 11, and 5. Is the upgrade worth it, right? That's actually a loaded question because you need more info, right? How much would it cost me to actually make this upgrade? Because if it costs me almost nothing, yeah, of course it's worth it. But if it actually costs me, say, for example, half the team's salary cap, right? Salary cap is usually, you know, there's an X amount of money you can spend for the whole team. And if you're going to get basically a, say, like maybe like a 5 to 10% upgrade for half the team's salary cap, it's not worth it, right? So it's not whether it's worth it or not, right? Just like it's not whether Ragnar is better than Guan or not. It's that what it's going to cost you and if that's worth it or not. And that's opportunity cost. Okay, so again, people that actually understand opportunity costs get this. People that don't will just look at a, say, like a commander tier list and go, oh, Ragnar is above Guan, you know, I'm going to invest in them. Well, you didn't actually set yourself up for the future. So in the short term, you might have gotten a moderate improvement, and long term, you actually messed up your account. All right, so that's an example for commanders. Obviously, equipment armaments factor into that, right? You can see here on the right, with this armament, do I reroll, right? I get that question a lot. Someone will ask me, should I reroll this? Without giving me any more context, how much is your spend? What's your activity level? What's your other sets? Like, I can't even answer that question. And this is very, very common. If I make this video, even in the comments section, people will like just start listing very minimal information and ask me what they should do, right? And the real answer is I'm actually not sure because I don't know what the opportunity cost is, right? When it comes to equipment, and well, let's just say equipment, right? An idea very important to understand is the whole idea of getting stats per mat spent, right? So essentially, you get X amount of attack per legendary material spent. When you have gray, green, and then blue equipment, right, the amount of stats you're getting per mat spend is actually very high. And as you get higher up in your equipment, right, you start getting into legendary, Awaken 2, you're right, all the way up to 5. That number gets lower and lower. Or another way to put it is that the amount of mass you need to spend to squeeze out another point of stat becomes a lot higher. This is very important for a game like this because it allows kind of a catch-up mechanism. So just because someone started before doesn't mean they always have a massive advantage, right? The gap is going to close. Someone who's been playing longer, is active, is still going to be ahead, but they're not going to be as ahead as both people's accounts get older and older, right? So that's very important to understand because when you're trying to decide opportunity costs, right here, if you make this upgrade, the stat per mat is going to be higher. Somewhere else, it's going to be lower, right? You have to then choose, okay, wow, I can actually upgrade 3 pieces here. I could actually get 8 points of attack for the same amount of legendary mats. Or over there, when I upgrade this from Awaken 4 to Awaken 5, right? The Awaken 4 to Awaken 5 will look better, but if you're actually caring about performance and output, then stats per mat is something very important, right? And then a quick, just, I'm not going to give an opportunity cost example, but when it comes to efficiency and output, it's the same thing, right? So efficiency, the way I define it, is essentially just how good your equipment, armaments, and your commanders are, right? The better that is, the more efficient you're going to be. You're going to get more output, but really what you're talking about is more efficiency, right? But when you get to a certain point, for example, if everything's Awaken 4 and your equipment, someone asks me, should I get everything to Awaken 5 or just open another march? The answer I'm going to give them is to open another march, because when it comes to stats per mat, right? If you open another march, your efficiency will go down a little bit, because now you have a march with equipment and armament that might not be as good, but a whole nother march gives you a lot more output that you can actually put out, right? So it's not always you go for efficiency, right? So you don't always just go make your equipment better. At some point you have to decide to open the march. You don't always go for output, because if you focus on output only, right, your speeds, your resources are going to go down a lot faster. And if you run out of speeds and resources before the fighting's over, then you didn't actually manage your account well. So again, someone who understands opportunity costs can actually properly manage their account, right? They kind of fight, quote unquote, full out, but then they always like kind of keep a little bit, or like they have a read on the situation, so they can get as close to maximizing their output until the fighting is over as possible without saving too much, right? Kind of like if you go for a run, right? You don't want to come out too fast and just burn out before the run's over, but you also don't want to pace and go too slow, where by the time you're done, you still have a lot more in the tank, okay? So another example here for equipment and armament, right? If someone just asked me, here, I have a Toyota Honda Civic, is upgrading to an Acura NSX worth it? You need to actually give me more context so we could figure out the opportunity cost, because you could give me some context where it is worth it, and then there's probably a lot more context where it's not, right? And then next, let's go actually talk about war, right? So when you are in war, right, one of the big thing is how much territory you have, you know, how many touch points you have, can you like clean the other people out, right? So every alliance has an amount of credits, right? The credits are needed to actually build flags in forts, right? But in Kingsland, just flags. And then you also have a certain amount of resources that, you know, alliance resources is going to cost. And then in KVK, especially when you get to Season of Conquest, it's also going to cost crystals, right? Now flags, as you build a certain amount, like when the first 20 is, I think, free or very cheap, right? And then as you get more and more, it's going to cost more and more crystals, right? When you're actually coming up with your war planning or your strategy, right, you have to keep in mind, okay, if I push this far, right, and we're going to start getting into our downtime, right? Can we actually hold this, right? If I build this and I can't really hold it, it's essentially just wasted resources. Another way to think about it is, you know, here in the US, right, a common benchmark for running is a mile. And usually on a track is 400 meters. 4 by 400 meters is a mile, right? If you think about war planning, and like KVK is going to be 4 days, right? Or like think 4 laps in a mile. If you go too hard on the first day, and there's going to be 4 days, you go too hard on the 4 days and you win the first day and it looks good and everything, but you didn't set yourself up for the other 3 days, was it a good strategy? No, right? But more often than not, when kingdoms make mistakes, right, they'll actually come out way too hard and not actually set themselves up in a way to succeed, because they didn't actually factor into the future, right? So the opportunity cost there is that you actually built more flags, you actually push your people and put them in a position where not only are they losing troops, maybe they had to fight on multiple fronts or TPing around, they're using a lot more speeds, resources. And really at the end of the day, like, you know, like people have jobs, right? They can't just like take an unlimited time off. And, you know, like this last KVK, it was actually really tough for 3 or 4 days. There were people that were working and trying to make it work, like try to hit flags, try to find the field. And the joke was a lot of people were like worried that they're in danger of getting fired because they spent like 3 or 4 days without actually getting any work done, you know, because they work from home or something, right? So a lot of times when you're in war, it's figuring out, okay, like you have to be able to plan for something much bigger, and it's not just winning the day or just winning like this next 3 hours, right? You want to win, but you also don't want to sacrifice too much in a way where, because you want these next 3 hours of this day, you actually set yourself up to fail in the future, right? So again, right, you want someone, if they're war planning, they're war leading, they understand the idea of opportunity costs, and they set you up. And it's super common, and I see this all the time. Been in kingdoms with this, I've seen this with other kingdoms. Everyone for some reason is a territory and war planning expert, and they have a lot of commentary, and a lot of times what people want to do, it might actually make you feel like you're winning in the short term, you're missing the opportunity cost of what it's actually costing you in the long term. All right. And then finally, let's get to recruiting. Okay. I'm going to give you two examples, right? Because right now, OL season's about to come up, right? That's Osiris League. I think it's going to come out in March. I actually don't know the exact date. But in Osiris League, it's 30 versus 30, right? So the opportunity cost is a couple things. And one of the main one is going to be a spot, right? If you only have 30 spots and you have 60 players that want to go in, right? Every player you select, it's going to cost you a spot that you could potentially have someone better, right? So the spots are actually tight. So if you have players that can't field 5 good marches, they just shouldn't probably be on the OL team if you could actually fill 30 spots with 5 good marches, right? But when you get to kingdom building in KBK, you're actually limited by one alliance, kind of. You can actually go more than one alliance, but let's just pretend you're limited by one alliance, right? If you have, say, 80 people active accounts in your kingdom, that means you have 70 spots that's unfilled, right? If you were playing basketball, and basketball is usually 5-on-5 professionally, right? And you had 4 players, right? Would it make sense for you to not field a 5th player, right? Like the 5th player will have to be really, really bad and probably something crazy for you to not at least want to get a warm body on the field, right? And then like once they like they can actually be below average, but if they can actually at least be a warm body and do certain things, you would want to take that 5th player because it actually gives you a better chance to win on the field, right? Now, let's just use the professional basketball example again, right? Obviously, you have to pay that person a certain amount of money, right? Maybe you have to give them 2-year contracts. Are they going to be around? Like there's other things you have to factor in. But every one of these decisions is the opportunity cost. But what baffles me with a lot of kingdoms is that they'll purposely actually leave a spot blank, right? Like I think the OL team, the OL example is easier to understand, right? Like if you have 28 players with good 5 marches and then you can't get the last 2, you're going to fill that spot, right? Because having something there is better than not having something there, right? In my opinion, more kingdoms should also take that approach to filling out their alliance, right? It doesn't mean you just take dead weights or people that can't contribute, right? But like you have to actually figure out, okay, like what is the opportunity cost or what is the currency is going to cost me, right? So one is obviously spots. Another one, I'll go back in the day. Back in the day, it used to be power, right? Because power factored into your top 300, which factored in a lot more into matchmaking and also being an Imperium, right? But like you have to figure out when you're building a roster, what is actually the currency that is limited and then you're playing with, right? So I'll give you one more example from the real world. I promise I'm not even that big of an NBA fan, but I guess the examples are really easy to use, right? So if I asked you, right, and you don't really have to know, right? 9 points per game is like a bench player, right? It's not like terrible, right? But it's not that good. So if a player is averaging 9 points per game on an NBA basketball team, we're judging it from the NBA level, right? Is that good, right? And if I asked you, you'd be like, well, it depends, right? Because if this player is making the minimum amount of salary, so basically, in the NBA, players can get like minimum salary. It's a not guaranteed contract. You give him signed into like a 10-day contract, and he's the 10th player on the team, right? So like basically the 5th player off the bench. He only gets like. He's only counted out minimally, and he's averaging 9 points per game. That's an amazing value for the amount of money and commitment you're paying to that player. But if you're committing a max salary, right? So max salary is sometimes like a player that's taking a third to maybe even up to like 40, 50% of the whole salary cap of the team, or he's the second best player on the team and he's only averaging 9 points per game. That's terrible, right? So it's not so much the 9 points per game, it's actually the opportunity cost of how much like that's costing and then what you're giving up by taking that player, right? So a lot of times people just want to pick a certain number and then just make a judgment on it without taking into account what was the actual salary on that player, right? This is like the 10th player on the team, like he's coming to the bench, he's averaging 9 points per game. He's actually a super value find and a huge addition to the team. Right? But if it's again someone who's counted on being a starter, that's just not good. Okay, so hopefully when you're building your account, you're looking at your kingdom. If you're running a kingdom and you're actually trying to make a decision, if you can actually identify what the opportunity cost is of that decision, your decision should be a lot more sound. And then when you're watching YouTube videos for Rise of Kingdoms, you're making a decision for yourself, or you're helping others out, you can actually give advice that makes a lot more sense. And then finally, I'll just leave with this. People that are really good at managing this aren't just managing one opportunity cost. It's actually a string or multitude of opportunity costs at once, right? So I didn't actually cover this, so I'll cover it now, right? Leveraging opportunity costs, right? So for example, let's just use that OL example, right? And this is how, say, for example, a smaller kingdom can actually start competing with a bigger kingdom, say like 1960 for a player, right? Because if they're trying to fill out a, say, OL team, and they're starting to fill out their roster, and they have 3 spots left, and they have 10 good players, right? And then we're a smaller kingdom, and we only have 10 spots occupied, and we have 20 spots open, right? The opportunity cost for between the two of us is different, right? Like, they actually have to be a lot more careful, and they can't really act, and they probably can't really take this player, whereas like we can actually go ahead and take this player, right? So like, it's important to get like, understand your situation, where you're at, and not just try to use a standard set by someone else that's not actually the right standard for you, right? Because like, this is how, say, for example, in college football, smaller teams can actually compete with bigger teams in recruiting. This is how smaller market teams can compete with bigger market teams in like professional sports. This is how smaller kingdoms can compete with bigger kingdoms for recruits, is actually understanding the situation, leveraging opportunity costs, and actually finding ways where they have an advantage, right? So can we kind of go back to that first opening slide when I had the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? This guy, Sam Presti, is a genius because he's a small market team. And not only has he set his team up for the future with a lot of draft capital, but his team is also really young with a lot of room to grow, and also uber talented right now with the potential to even maybe compete for a championship right now, right? Like, that's actually kind of like the pinnacle or the ideal of what you're looking for. All right, so if you have watched all the way to the end, and hopefully you gained some value from this, please like and subscribe to the video if you haven't. Again, thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.